Mic's on.
Mic up.
Mike up.
Okay, welcome to the February 27th, 2025 Abita Springs Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Welcome everyone. Start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Roll call. Everyone's here except John. Make a note of that. Call for agenda modifications. I think we want to change the
Yes.
order of some things.
Yes, we need to, I accidentally left out the, can you read it for me, Chad? It's on your sheet, it's not on mine.
Okay. So we need to add to the planning portion of the meeting, the Oshner Development Clearing Permit.
Yes.
We want to move the,
And yes, we want to move the discussion, because someone has to leave for a previous engagement, move the discussion above zoning.
okay.
Okay.
So those two changes, we need a motion and a second and a unanimous vote.
All right. Can we get a motion to modify the agenda as discussed?
I'll move to modify the agenda as discussed.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Motion carries. Okay. I think everyone got a chance to review the minutes from the January 30th meeting. Anyone have any changes, revisions?
No, I
don't
move
believe
that we
so.
accept the minutes
Okay.
as they are.
A second?
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're going to start tonight with the planning portion, the corrected agenda for the Oshner Development Clearing Permit.
Okay, so Oshner, it's the new development at the northwest corner of Highway 59 in Harrison. The applicants have been going through the historic process. They've been to 2 meetings. Now they've been to 1 meeting here, and now they're going through the development land clearing permit process. Because it is an untouched site, they needed to get permission to develop the site. Let's see. It is zoned it's zoned appropriately. The parking, they actually have more parking than's required. Let's see. They have the appropriate roadway buffer and the adjacent use buffer are in place. They are planning to plant 50 Class A trees, 45 Class B trees, 590 shrubs and plants, and over 30,000 square feet of ground cover. It's been reviewed by landscape architect and our town arborist, and they have a few changes that might need to be made. They will resubmit their final tree plan with the permit, but everything meets the criteria right now. There is a 36-inch live oak tree on the property that Dr. Malcolm Guidry would like to reassess after the underbrushing is done, and he can get closer to it and look at it. If the tree is in poor health or declining health, and if it won't survive the construction process, we'll monitor it as the process goes, then it will be recommended to remove and to replant live oaks in place of it. But that's gonna have to be something that he is gonna be monitoring the site as they work. Let's see. And then that's pretty much a summary. This is, for people that haven't seen it yet, this is the parcel that they're developing. It's Lot 1.
A little small.
Then this is the site plan. Yes, per the master plan, they put their parking on the rear and on the side, so it's not the focus when you drive by. This is Harrison Avenue at the bottom of the page. Dumpsters in the back, it'll be screened. I think they're removing 10 trees.
Yes, I counted 10.
Yeah.
No. I don't think so.
I don't believe there is.
Well, the right-of-way is not under our purview, right? It's under St. Tammany Parish.
Correct. They are going to St. Tammany Parish. They're on the agenda for their March 11th meeting for the right-of-way access permit. So they'll be going through them. So this is their tree preservation plan. There's 2 protected trees on the property, the live oak that we talked about, and then the magnolia. Those are the 2 trees that they are hoping to preserve. This is the preliminary landscape plan that some edits will be made to. They're just removing some trees that the landscape architect and the arborist agreed would not be appropriate for the site. It's going to have 21 exam rooms, 2 blood draws, and obviously offices and staff rooms. Those are the elevations. Yeah, Historic has given final approval at their last meeting. They were very pleased with the design.
That's weird.
And that's the inside office. Okay,
This one shows
that's
it way far away.
Do y'all have any questions?
So, because it's more than 5 trees, we gotta review and approve the landscaping plan.
Right.
So what is criteria number 1 for the notice to proceed? That's under staff response. We're gonna issue a permit once we approve the development. We'll issue a notice to proceed in the criteria 1.
I didn't think you would actually have any questions. I was just asking as a courtesy.
I mean, criteria 1, criteria 2 is an option.
Right.
Okay.
So the tree preservation plan looks different than the site plan, like the location of the tree, the live oak. It's right next to the drive there, and it's way far away here.
Let me find criteria 1 first.
Yeah, look, that's a little bit short. There must have been an
What
adjustment.
page are you looking at, Chad, for criteria 1?
5. Page 5. I'm sorry, 4. Staff response, the first staff response. Yeah, staff response, we're proven under criterion 1.
A development permit or preliminary subdivision approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission and notice to proceed shall be required to be issued in conjunction with the issuance. It's just saying that once you guys approve this, then it can be issued. Sorry. Should not have been that complicated. Right. When you do your motion, that's the language you'll use, but we have to do public comments first.
All right, and the only changes we're making to the landscaping plan are just taking out the inappropriate shrubs.
Correct.
Replacing them with something,
Correct.
same count, just
Yes.
different species.
Yes.
Okay.
And Mike, what was your question? I'm sorry. About the location?
There's just a discrepancy, but I mean, the arborist is gonna keep an eye on the tree, so. I was just concerned about its proximity to the drive.
Oh,
'cause,
okay.
I have a friend who's an arborist, and he told me that if you cut or sever off more than 30% of a tree's root zone, it will die.
Okay.
So, like, that one looks good, but if you look at this, is that the site plan? One of them's really close. I think it's,
Okay.
of the tree preservation plan, it's really close. I just didn't know which one was the right one. I think it's one more, maybe? Yeah, that
Go.
one. Look at where the live oak is there. See how close it is to the drive? It's like right there. Just a comment.
Okay. Is that a planting bed? Is that a planting bed or an actual? But right here. I'll have Dr. Guidry check on that.
Okay.
I think the drive is touching the slight outer, the dirt line, but I think that this part is like a planting bed.
Okay. But it's still construction.
Right.
That's a concrete path, I would imagine.
Okay, I'll have Dr. Guidry look at that before.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Nope.
I got one quick one on the storm management. Are those underwater drains that you're seeing in the dotted lines from the parking lot, draining it into the water retention pond?
The engineers reviewed all the stormwater that was with the engineers, and they are still working through, they had a few comments that didn't affect this, but I'd have to check with the engineers.
Because this is just a clearing.
Yes.
Yep, just clearing
Yeah.
permit. Okay.
It's not a public hearing, but are there any other questions? No. Yeah.
This one or yours?
It's probably too late for this comment, but I'm going to give a broad comment. In accordance with the master plan, which was approved, and for that matter, the safety, the pedestrian safety, the town has made one of its objectives to be a walkable town. This particular project is doing the exact reverse. The current situation is a clinic it's one of the few walkable services that we have in town. And this will be somewhere that is entirely not walkable. And for that reason, I would at least ask the permission for this be postponed until a walkable path is created. And I've proposed one, and I don't think it'll be there in a hurry, but it's possible to connect the Tammany Trace to 59 at that intersection. And if that bicycle pedestrian path were built, then this part of town would be walkable. But at present, it's not walkable. And approving this will significantly reduce the walkability of our town, because we'll be losing one, and this just would have to be reached only by driving. It can't even be reached safely by bicycle. So I urge you to postpone approving it.
I did reach out to St. Tammany Parish and ask them if they would have any objections to sidewalks, and I'm still waiting on a response for that. It's their right of way, so we need to wait to hear what their opinion is on that.
Okay. Any other questions?
Nope.
So we're looking to approve the landscape plan, which will trigger the issuance of the development clearing permit. So looking for a motion to approve the landscaping plan
Okay,
as noted with the revisions to be made by the town arborist.
okay, I make that motion to accept it with the modifications
Okay.
by our arborist.
A second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All good on that? Yes. Okay. Next item, we have a public hearing on two items. Item number one, adoption of the Beta Springs Safe Streets for All Action Plan.
So this is something that we've been talking about for months. I'm going to let Kara give you a brief summary and answer any questions that you might have.
Good evening. I'm happy to see you all again. I was here last month to do about a 10 or 15 minute introduction about the Safe Streets for All Action Plan. My name is Kara Dudek-Meisel, and I'm with Desire Line, as well as Alex and Matt. We are a sub-consultant to Fairway Consulting and Engineering. They were the prime consultant on the creation of the Safe Streets for All Action Plan. And at the last town council meeting, we also brought the Safe Streets plan there and gave an introduction and an overview. But tonight, I thought I would just very briefly talk through what the components are, not actually scroll through it like I did last time, but in case anyone wasn't here when we did the introduction last month, just so that they're oriented a bit to the plan and the plan process. This is federal funding for this grant, and it's from the U.S. Department of Transportation that helps with big dollar projects within the town for pedestrian safety, roadway safety, and overall has a goal to reduce the serious crashes and deaths on town roadways. So there's a variety of infrastructure implementation projects that actually change the road geometry, and there's also planning and policy recommendations that are such as safe streets or safe routes to schools, things like that. So they're both the infrastructure on the ground things and then also the planning and policy type things. It has a variety of data collection that centers around the demographics of the town and also the surrounding area as it serves a larger area, as well as public health analysis, connections to the town's master plan, and then also along with the master plan, the land use review, as a lot of these things are occurring within the built environment. And then, of course, looking at the roadway network, the crash data, and then identify those high-risk locations based on crash data, combined with what we heard from the community through the online survey, through the interactive map where people could drop points, and then 2 meetings. And then up from that, these planning and policy recommendations came out, and then we provided an implementation matrix which prioritized the projects. There's 15 major infrastructure projects, and remember, these are big dollar amounts because they're grants that we can now receive from the federal government because we have the Safe Streets for All Action Plan here in Abita Springs. And the last thing that's in the plan is just transparency and conclusion. So like a month or a annual report rather that says what's been accomplished on the planning and policy projects.
So let me ask you this. I heard some comments in the meeting last week about the cost of this. Was not part of this paid for through a grant, the plan? Is that correct?
That's right. It's all, I think there was a small share, like a 10% share that was local funds. And then the rest of it is a substantial project. Though I will say most of the work, it was over a $300,000 plan. And the reason for that is it's a lot of engineering work. So if anybody made it to the community meeting, you would see all those preliminary designs of the proposed improvements, which is, takes a lot of time and expertise. There was also a safety task force that met 4 times to review, which we want to thank the town and all of the people who participated in this, online mapping and surveying. But a lot of the costs were engineering costs. And that's why we want to mention and give a big shout out to Fairway Engineers who worked directly on all those schematics. And just to speak a little bit to the complicated nature of these projects is a lot of y'all's major crashes are on state highways. So it's not simple to make improvements and work with the OTD and get their engineers to approve designs and then greenlight construction that has to be bid, it has to be procured. So these are very expensive projects to do, even though on the surface they do look pretty simple and very common sense. I want to make sure that everyone knows too that those projects that can happen on the ground in the town with local funds are generally not included in this because the purpose of this plan is really to position those projects that the town can't fund for grant dollars. And it's a prerequisite actually for federal funding for the same program that funded the plan. In order to get projects funded from that, you have to have completed this plan, completed and produced a list of projects. And it's really to move those projects forward. So we don't want to imply that if the project isn't listed on this, it doesn't mean the town isn't pursuing it with local dollars. It just means that it's maybe not something that you need to spend money or time pursuing a grant for.
Right, so the plan was primarily paid for by, not the
Yes.
town, and the grants, the big projects are things we would pursue grants for, you needed to plan for, so.
Well, I think it's so the plan was a little over 300,000, and it was funded by federal funds. I want to be clear that you got a federal grant to pay for the plan, and I think it had a 10% match, which is around 35,000.
The federal amount was $252,000 and the town match was $63,000.
Thanks, Kara.
Yeah, I think just people heard a big number and I thought it was a lot of federal money.
It's a lot of federal money and a lot in the lion's share of the cost for engineering.
Okay. Okay, so anything else to? All right, going to open for public comments. Jared?
Well,
I'm not going to stop
commenting.
I'm going to repeat myself to some extent because I don't know who was at the town meeting. I'm personally outraged by this entire plan. I was one of the people, citizens appointed, and I went to all the meetings. But this cost $312,000 of taxpayer money. Only $60,000 directly from the town, but it's still taxpayer money, even if it comes from the government, the federal government. But we knew before we started that we needed crosswalks, and we even knew where they should be in general. This went through the road for filling out the forms of looking at the census data and all kinds of stuff, and the stuff in the front of this project is not offensive. It's not terribly new, but it's not offensive. What offends me is the total. When we went through discussing what needed to be done, we talked about all these things. We made some suggestions that were taken and some which weren't taken. For instance, I think the changes to the roundabout would actually make it more dangerous, but the roundabout in the middle of the town, because the idea is to move the pedestrian walks further away, but that means they won't get used as much and people will be crossing, jaywalking. And some of the other ones, the only item which is cheap was the Hickory Street crossing of 36, and the reason that's cheap is they left out the crosswalk and just did a little touch up on the roadway. But anyway, the net result of these 15 projects, which were somehow selected, and they are over $1 million each. The total is $16.5 million that we're asking for. Which would be ridiculous for a town our size. I mean, what branch of government that's remotely responsible would be giving about $5,000 per resident, for traffic improvements, even if we only got one or two. Now, one of them is already approved, so I don't even know why that's on the list. That's the roundabout at Harrison and 59. But in the meantime, what we need are sidewalks. I mean, sidewalk crossings, not full sidewalks, maybe a little bit to allow the crossing, what they call zebra crossings. And I don't know what they actually would cost, but a typical cost for zebra crossings is more along the lines of $30,000. And these are all coming out at over $1 million. And it just doesn't make any sense, and it will look foolish if we go asking for it. But if you want to approve it, go ahead. I don't see any harm in it other than embarrassing us. But I do think that since we're talking about safe streets for all, we ought to include smaller, more feasible projects in this. And to that end, I've put a list on your desk of 15 smaller projects that I feel should be added as an appendix if you're going to go ahead with this, because it would be good to get them down in writing. Most of them have been brought up before, not always by me, and they're not too controversial. One of them is controversial, I'm sure, but that doesn't, just because it's on the list doesn't mean it has to actually happen. But I think it would be a good idea. So I presented these to you in written form, and I'm hoping that if you do decide to pass this and approve this plan, that you add this as an additional appendix, or as I call it, a dissenting report. And I'm glad to answer any questions if you have any about my opinions. Thank
Good,
you.
I think there's a lot of good things on here, and I think
So
it was addressed that, yeah, a lot of the plan is focused on the grant application and not, yeah, like enforcement of current laws and speed limit signs, yeah, all good things. So. Make a motion to close the public hearing on this item.
Motion to close.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Looking for a motion to approve the Safe Streets Plan as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve the Safe Street Plan.
Okay. Second? Second, all in favor?
I wasn't actually finished, but I do really like some of Stuart's
I do
ideas.
too.
Yeah.
And
These
I
are
think
great
that,
suggestions.
I think they are, because I do kind of agree with Stuart. There's a lot of little bitty things we can do that don't cost a lot of money that should be more incorporated, like more the rubber speed bumps and things like that. And, you know, more sidewalks. I mean, this town needs a lot more sidewalks than it currently has. But anyway, I'll end with that.
Yeah, I mean, any plan can be amended, right?
I will say, in the presentation at the council meeting, the last council meeting, Stuart brought these conditions up as well, and the town clerk took the list and committed to reviewing it. And the council similarly shared y'all's inclination to incorporate this into budgeting and planning for the town.
Okay, good.
All right, so got a second out of Claire. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. That's carried. Okay, this concludes the planning portion of the meeting.
Nope, just the first public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Second public hearing, yes. Forgot about Mr. Charles.
Yes.
Next item up is the revocation and/or swap of 15,000 square foot portion of the unopened 13th Street between St. Tammany Trace and St. Charles Street.
Yes. So, while this loads, very slowly. It's only had about 30 minutes to load, so.
Oh.
It's got to be close to being done. Yeah, thank you. Okay, thanks. So this was on last month's agenda. Y'all met Mr. Tracy McElvin, and I'll show you on the GIS the portion of, while we wait for that, that we're talking about. Mr. McElvin owns this square and this square. This is 46 is the full square, and then 45 is a partial square. And what he is requesting is the revocation and/or swap of this unopened 13th Street. As you can see, that 13th Street is back here, and it was installed in the wrong place many, many, many years ago. So it does not really connect to St. Charles. So Mr. McElvin is requesting the revocation of this unopened portion of 13th between his two parcels of property for a home to be built for his daughter. Let me turn on the overhead. There is currently a home on the property. Fantastic. Just great. There we go. There's currently a home on the property that I think the plan is to demolish. Okay. And I can show you street view. So this is the unopened portion, the unopened street right here. Okay. Here we go. So this was advertised as a public hearing. Mr. McElvin wrote a letter, which everyone had a copy of, with the request. And this is the 50 feet, and he's proposing a swap of this 50 feet on the end of his property. So staff reviewed the request, and the findings were, well, to approve this, you guys would be either recommending a favorable or unfavorable suggestion to the town council, and then the town council would take this up and see what would be required to, they would make the decision if they wanted to move forward and then have an appraisal done. The master plan does mention the connection of 12th Street to that road, which is a little bit higher up. It's right. It's right here. So if 12th Street ever was to be installed, like the master plan suggested to complete the grid pattern in this area, that would further make the 13th Street connection unnecessary. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
What you find, you'll see in the staff report in the findings, what you find is you look at the streets, the street to the north, the nearest one that crosses the trace is 6th. So now you're down to, and the master plan says, let's extend 12th. So that kind of puts a priority on 12th. Given the conditions in the area and, you know, this is the edge of the grid pattern. If you look across the road to St. Charles Street, you see a different kind of lotting pattern that is more large lots. You also see that somewhat in the traditional lotting pattern. Several people have more than one lot. So one of the two things you have to determine is, one, that the right-of-way is not usable, not needed. And then secondly, that there are some unusual hardships faced by the applicant such that the right-of-way could be revocated.
Yeah, well, I can tell you 13th Street where it meets the trace is a huge hole, low spot. There's a fire, water hydrant that comes up. There's a bench there.
Right.
A lot of.
Right. Yeah, where this, I think this would, the proposed swap, where that would come out would be in that vicinity of that bench. When staff looked at this, really what we found was, well, there's a pond on the subject property. The property's got two parts. The northernmost part of the north of the right-of-way is about 2 acres, and then you've got about 1 acre to the south. On the south side of the right-of-way, there's a pond on the northernmost piece, such that it's limiting the ability to build a house there. They'd like to take that house out and rebuild. The additional right-of-way area would provide the room for that and allow them to meet the modern setbacks. The current house is built 2 feet into the right-of-way. So staff found that it doesn't appear that, given the priority, particularly in the master plan, to extend 12th and the lack of streets that do cross and the presence of wetlands in the area, there's probably, and there's not a lot of lots for this to serve. Partly why these streets were platted was to serve the 10 lots on the northernmost property and the probably similar 10 lots in the block to the south. That's not needed anymore when these are consolidated under 1, maybe 2 ownerships. So, and staff found that the reasoning of it's not often that you get a 7/10 of an acre pond on a residential property in a developed city. So that was an unusual circumstance. The properties currently have adequate access. So staff's recommendation is not to go forward with a swap, but rather just to recommend the revocation of the unopened 13th Street right-of-way between the two properties. And I think I touched on everything I wanted to get to, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
What's the legal definition for revocation?
Well,
I didn't look it up before. I'm not, a gotcha question. I just.
yeah, well, it's where I come from in Oregon, it's called a vacation, but you're restoring the right-of-way back to theoretically where it came from, which was the properties on either side of the right-of-way. So typically, right-of-way laws, the ones I'm familiar with, in state law, they go out to the middle of the road. So if you come in for it and you live on one property and your neighbor's on the other side of the right-of-way, you'd each get to the middle of the road. So here you've got one owner, they're gonna get both middles of the road, so to speak. Yeah, that's about the best I can do. I mean, it's basically, you would record an ordinance, you would send that on to the assessor, so they know that this is now taxable property and not a right-of-way.
I went and rode this today before the meeting, and I think 9th Street's the closest it crosses, so this is one of the few times when we discuss giving selling the land to the people that actually think this would be a good thing to do. Although I think actually just selling, or as opposed to trading, would probably be just cleaner and easier, because I'm not sure how much use the town would get out of that 50-foot at the bottom of the property.
Right. It's another right-of-way that doesn't necessarily make a great connection. And it's very rare well, I'm going to give you one of my mantras here. This is one I've said for years. Cities don't typically build streets. Developers build streets.
Yeah.
So that's why in every small town I've ever worked in, there's always a bunch of unopened streets next to lots that were platted 100 years ago when you didn't have a planning commission to oversee things. And it's why you see in today's world, when you see a subdivision built, you see all the streets put in first. That's what we do now. That's what we didn't do then. Back then, you ran down to the courthouse and you got it recorded, and we'll figure out who's building the streets later. And that's how you wind up with these kind of situations. So.
What's the hardship?
They'd like to rebuild the house. The house is currently the house can't be rebuilt in the current location. So in order to meet the setback, now they're within 10 feet of the pond.
And they're trying to avoid the live oak, the beautiful live oak.
Right.
The property line is dead in the center of that oak tree, right in front of the
Yeah.
oak tree, where the 300-foot mark stops. It's dead in the center of that oak tree. 2 feet of that house sits on 13th Street. And so if I ship it over from the back left corner of that house, if I measure over to the pond, I got 32 feet. But then I say, when I do 20-foot back set plus the 2 feet on there, that's 22 feet. No leaking 10 feet between the pond and the house.
Oh,
So
that's
that's
not
what I
enough.
was trying to get. If nothing else, if I could just move the house backwards, because they tell me if I tear off 10 feet off the front, I'll add 10 feet on the back of it. So what I'm trying to do is I want to just tear the house down. I just want to move it straight back. I'm not trying to encroach more onto the street or anything, because I won't have room to build a house.
Yeah, the further you go back, the wetter it is. Then you're getting into more
It gets
trees.
wet when you
Yeah.
get towards the trace on that
Yeah.
piece of property.
Yeah.
Very marshy.
So you should now open the public hearing for, if you don't have any more questions of staff, you should open the public hearing for public comments.
Yeah, that was a great report, so.
Yeah.
I'd like to open for public comments.
Then we miss you.
Not as much.
Well, it seems odd to me that this entire request, because the lot, if I heard right, is 2 acres. The bottom lot is another acre, but the top lot is 2 acres, and that's a heck of a lot of room to put a house. It doesn't have to be in the exact spot at the edge like it used to be. I mean, it could be at the top part above the lake, and so I don't really see why there's a hardship in trying to build a house on this lot. It's 2 acres. It's not like that little tiny triangular thing that was discussed at another time. And in general, I'm very skeptical about giving up right-of-ways because it's hard to predict the future. And we do know we need to connect that the discussion of having one on 12th Street is fine, but we don't have it. And it might turn out in the long run that we want it on 13th Street. And there's no special reason why that would be impractical that has been brought up. So in general, I just don't see this. I don't see there being a hardship because it could be built elsewhere in that 2-acre property. And there's supposed to be a hardship according to our ordinance. Thank you.
The reason I was building in that spot. Well, the reason I was building where the house is at, because everything is already there. The gas lines, the water line, the sewer lines, everything is already there. So just to move the house back from off the oak tree to go back 20, 30 feet back off of it and stuff, and everything will still be there. We won't have to acquire the additional fees of tapping it. If I go to the other side of the pond, which there's no taps or anything, so we have to acquire to getting all that put in and everything. So that's the reason I was trying to do it right there where that's at, just to move it back and see if I could just get that section. And like I say, 12th Street is a drainage ditch. It won't be a street there because that was a drainage from when I was a kid. And it hadn't been cleaned out, but it's still, the culvert runs under the road going from on 12th Street, it goes under the street right there. And if you move further up St. Charles Street about another 50 feet, coming on to the second lot, it's also another culvert goes on the street that drains through the yard that goes to the creek that's run through the property. So that's why I'm in between stuff that I'm trying to do. And trying to acquire the street was just, and like say, 13th Street don't connect to anything from St. Charles to the Trace. But if I was saying if y'all would swap with me and you take the left side of my property, at least it gets you closer to 13th Street where it comes through. 13th Street curves and St. Peter's runs on the back side of the property. So you'll be able to just make an easier tie-in if you wanted to make a right-of-way, if you ever decide to do a right-of-way.
So what do you think about the suggestion to not trade, but buy the right-of-way? What do you think about the suggestion to not trade, but buy the right-of-way? That was the recommendation.
Well, that was one.
Well, one.
The recommendation is revocation of the right-of-way. How that is resolved financially is the council's decision. So we're not saying sell it, we're just saying don't do a swap. That's what the recommendation is.
Okay.
I was wondering, is that a power line
Yes,
right
it's a
of way?
power line.
If you did
Yeah,
put the
St.
road
Tam-
down
St.
at that bottom
St.
area,
Tammany
would
West put
would
a
it be any
power
issue
line.
with going through the power line area? Because you'd have to cut. Okay, I was just curious if that would be an issue.
Okay.
So we're only, again, this is a recommendation to push it to the town council, and they don't have to follow our recommendation. They could say
That's correct. Right.
A, B, or C.
Right,
Your
that's,
own.
that's correct. And if you look on page 5 of the staff report, we've included a sample motion, because I know this one gets a little complicated.
All right.
So I think our real question is about the hardship, right? And you've made some analysis of that and tying in with the master plan and, yeah, so. You got any questions about the hardship or?
Nope.
Again, we're not approving it, we're just recommending to move forward and let the town council make the final decision.
Okay. So we need to make a motion. It's at the very back.
Yeah, you have to wait for the numbers.
Oh, gotcha.
Is this discussion only, or do we make a motion now?
We need,
So you're kind of at your decision point here where you're having your final discuss, you could, if you want to go ahead and close the public hearing. And then you're kind of in your discussion prior to making a decision mode, moving towards some kind of motion.
make a motion to close the public comments on this item.
Does anybody else have anything they want to say? I'll make a motion, we close the public hearing,
I'll second it.
public comments.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I
Items-
personally think we should recommend to the aldermen that we do this particular swap of the property, of the right-of-way for whichever way they want to do it. I mean, personal
Revocation.
thoughts are it'd be easier to sell it to them, but that's just another thing. Then,
But that's not our decision to make,
No.
that's theirs,
Right.
so,
We would just suggest
so, yeah.
the revocation of it
I'm
and let them
usually,
decide.
I'm usually
how.
not in favor of making these swaps, but in this case, I actually am.
Well, and actually, the bottom, where we would be acquiring the property, if we were to acquire the property, makes better sense and access to the roads.
Right.
So
That was what I thought last time was, yes,
Yeah,
it
I
was
just think
closer to the alignment.
it does make a better sense, and, okay. I move to recommend to the town council revocation to the undeveloped 13th Street right-of-way located between Block 45 and Block 46 of Bossier City Addition.
A second?
Now, let me ask you a question real quick. Based on what you were just saying a couple minutes ago, are you saying you're in favor of swapping the land or not?
I'm in favor of letting the council decide which way to go on this.
Okay, okay.
Recommending the
At
revocation.
least the revocation of
Yeah, just the
13th Street. I think-
revocation.
I got you.
Right.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I wasn't hard over on selling it. I just think it'd be easier in the long run.
So,
Yeah,
Yep.
I did.
All right, all in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Now we're complete with the planning portion of the meeting. And move to
Yes. Discussion.
zoning.
We're going to go to discussion and then save zoning for last, if that's okay.
Okay.
So first item up for discussion, short-term rental application, 71317 St. Joseph.
Yes. So that is the Dupuis. They filled out their application information. They had their fire report. They had their occupational license applied for, and they are ready for their short-term rental permit. They just needed, since it's their first time getting their short-term rental permit, they needed to come to you guys for approval, but it is, they are ready to go. I can pull it up. Let's see. What, yeah, it's by the graveyard.
I don't see that one.
So you're almost there. Well,
Yes, it's this house.
Okay, yeah, we looked at that before.
We don't see any reason why it shouldn't be approved. Everything's in order.
everything's in order with the application, anyway, so.
Yeah.
What number is this on our?
12 or 13.
Yeah, 12 or 13, and right now, we're in the process of, everyone that has an approved application is renewing. If they miss the renewal deadline, they have to come back before you for permission. So I think we're in line by the end of next week to have about 10 or 11 ready to go, like, approved. So, okay,
Anybody had any issues with this?
None.
Questions?
No.
No,
So,
that's
Perfect.
good.
thank you. Okay,
Next discussion item,
yes,
setback variance at 22201 Level Street.
yes.
Sally's old house.
Mr. Earl, you gonna present on this, or Kristen, or both of y'all?
Everyone has on their desk it's got yellow highlight on the top that tells you what is allowed to have a variance. And that's kind of spelled out for you. And I'm gonna present the application, and this is for discussion. If Mr. Carr decides to move forward with it, we'll do a public hearing for the next meeting, and he'll do an official request that y'all will vote on in a public hearing. So this is the house. This is just to explain the situation. These are the setbacks for this size lot: 20 feet on the sides, 30 feet in the front, and 25 feet in the rear, or 20% the depth of the lot. When the house was built by a previous person with previous administration, the carport was put in with a 19-foot connection that should have only been a 6-foot wide connection, because that is what makes it detached, and that's what allows it to be in the setbacks. So that is what Mr. Carr bought when he purchased the property. Since then, he has added an art studio that meets the setback requirements of 5 feet from the building and 5 feet from the property line. And now he would like to add a patio and cover. And the cover would further connect the carport to the home, and it would be 1 foot away from the back of the house. So he is asking you guys to. The standard is 5 feet from the house and 5 feet from the property line, and no more than a 6-foot wide connection between the carport and the home, which that was inherited by him when he bought the property as is. And he will explain the drainage issues that he's having that he thinks that this will help solve.
Can I ask a quick
Sure.
question? I thought the 5-foot was for a detached home. I thought you could put like a shed or something 5 foot from the property line, that your main building of your house has to be 25 foot.
Yes. So
The 16 foot, you said that makes the carport no longer detached from the main house?
correct.
Yeah.
So then does the 5 foot apply to the art studio and everything? I realize you bought it like that, but I'm just trying to figure out. I just don't know if we should be using the 5 foot or the 25 foot setback at this point. That's my question.
So the way the law reads is that if you would like to build something in your setbacks, it has to be detached. The detachedness, the fact that it's an ancillary building and it's not connected to the main structure is what gives you the leeway of the 5 feet from the property line. So you can have your house in your regular setbacks, then you can have a detached, either livable or non-livable structure, but it's got to be detached. Well, the fact that this is connected with 19 feet of roof changes it from detached to attached. So it actually makes the square footage of the whole structure, it becomes the main structure, and it's in the setbacks. But that is something that was allowed before. I don't know.
I call it an allowed variance if it got permitted that way, so
Yeah,
That ship has sailed.
allowed variance
Yeah.
because it's still detached.
Exactly.
I think the issue here is that the patio and cover needs to be 5 feet from the building and 5 feet from the property line, not 1 foot from the building.
Yeah, the
That's
1
the
foot
issue.
concerns me. I mean, is it a roof right next to the house?
this is where I'm going to let Mr. Carr take over because he can explain that better.
Okay.
Go ahead, your question is?
I was asking about how the roof can be so close to the house.
The engineer does not like does not like the patio cover attached to the house. I personally would like it detached.
Okay.
He says there's going to be differential movement with wind and
Yeah,
so
that's
forth like that.
engineers, right.
So,
Structural.
but it will be under the eave.
So the eave of the house and the roof of the
Patio
other
cover,
house?
hang on. There is a photograph of the backyard.
Is this it?
That's it.
That's it. No, that's the carport.
That's the carport, yeah.
This
Okay.
one?
That's
There you
it.
go.
Okay.
So this is facing Laurel Street. with the double doors.
Your back is to Laurel.
Pardon me?
Your back is to Laurel at this.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Okay? So that will, and you see that window on the left-hand side, that small window? The patio cover will come under the eave to basically that location on an angle, 1 foot off of the left-hand wall. That's a 2-foot overhang that's a 2-foot overhang on the roof, on the left side.
So it's 1 foot under that.
Yes.
All I can say is may make maintenance difficult on working on your roof or soffit or fascia. Will there be gutters or no gutters?
We're going to put gutters on it. Right now, we've lived in this house for 3.5 years. We've never been able to enjoy the backyard.
Oh,
It's very wet back there.
Right.
Very wet.
It
back
is.
there.
what now?
The Tide commercial with the kids rolling around in it, I've got 3 6-year-olds, and they roll around in it.
Right, okay.
It's very wet back there.
And we have, Kristen, I think you have a photograph of the,
It's unusable.
What do you have to do?
that was taken yesterday,
Yeah,
and the rain was Sunday.
yeah.
There's no grass.
So what you're saying is the patio and the cover, you're gonna keep that from getting wet in that dead end spot?
That's correct.
How are you gonna improve the drainage back there?
We're gonna gutter the house.
Okay,
We're gonna then put subsurface drainage to the ditch.
French drains?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
You gotta move the water.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you do.
And with the pitch of the
make a rain
roof,
garden.
that water's coming off of there like a rocket ship.
Yeah.
But your patio cover is gonna be far enough out that now you can
It's gonna
drain
catch,
out
it,
to the
patio
main.
cover will catch the main house, and the studio will come this way. And it'll catch it, push it this way to a drain.
Okay.
I just want to remind everybody, you don't have to make a decision tonight. This is just a discussion for the public hearing that will be next month. So if you have any questions or you need Mr. Carr to bring any more information next month, you could request that.
Is this fence on your property line?
It is. It's 5 feet from the back of the studio.
5-foot gap right there?
That's correct. It's a public meeting and it's advertised, so they can certainly make their presence.
Looks like
Oh,
a
no,
bunch
there's
of
someone
bamboo.
It's a lot of bamboo.
I mean, there's a house next door. It's a,
Yes.
yeah, long-term nurses
Yeah.
living there, I believe.
Oh,
Yeah. It got renovated a couple years ago. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Earl? Okay.
How big is that patio gonna be, Mr. Earl?
Basically 16 by 20, give or take, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay,
We haven't put the final touches to it.
okay, okay,
And it has been approved by Historic.
okay.
oh, good, okay.
All right.
Very good.
It'd be nice to be able to use your backyard.
We'll try.
Keep the kids from getting all dirty.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Earl. I guess we'll see you next month.
Okay.
All right. So discussion items are complete. Now we can move to zoning. Talk about review of the proposed draft zoning classifications.
Yes, this is very exciting. I think Matt's going to do this presentation. Oh, that's great.
Cooking with gas.
Hey, Matt. Go all the way down to the end of the class.
Okay, so these were the only changes that we were gonna make on this.
Yeah, this
These are removal. The other ones are, These are the,
Weird classification.
Yeah,
these are the changes, that's what's there.
yeah.
And those are to
And then
be
these are to be
removed.
removed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Cool.
All right, good evening, everyone. As my colleague Kara so lovely introduced me earlier, my name's Matt Wilson, and I work for Desireline. We've been contracted by the town to complete an update of the Land Development Code. And tonight we have a presentation put together for you on the comprehensive rezoning process. This is sort of the next step in our Land Development Code update. There's sort of two parts to this presentation. There's a brief refresher on what the rezoning process is and how we got here. And then the second part will be a review and discussion of current draft materials. So the rezoning process, this is coming out of the future land use map process, and the goals of it really are to correct longstanding issues that that the town currently has with the current zoning map, aligning district regulations with best planning practices. So that's changing the text of the districts that apply to the map, implementing goals of the comprehensive master plan, streamlining code administration and making it easier for the town staff to administer the code. Increasing like public awareness and understanding of land use practices and how the code functions. And then, really this all sort of comes together and is meant to make, predictability of development and the land management process a lot better. Some of the must-haves that we've identified with this, and this isn't an exhaustive list, but ones that stuck out are addressing outstanding issues with commercial districts. We actually have some amendments to the commercial district, which y'all recommended for approval to council, which are going before council for a vote at their next meeting. Creating an intent and purpose statements for the existing zoning districts, streamlining setback and lot density requirements, and then standardizing code format between districts, just making the code easier to read.
And I want to make sure, Matt, I noticed you skipped over creating the new mixed-use districts. And these must-haves
yes.
are coming from, I know where a lot of people are excited about those. But a lot of this process is coming from, or these must-haves are coming from, like Matt said, the future land use map process, which comes from your master planning process. So y'all have been in a lot of planning processes. But this actually, the rezoning is where the rubber really meets the road. So it's exciting to be at this point. And I think what I would say is we actually collected a lot of feedback at those meetings where we talked about the future land use map, about the zoning. And so that's where we're getting these must-haves, and we've been working with staff and the public over the past couple months.
Yeah, and that sort of bleeds into this next slide, which is really how we got here. If y'all remember, late last year we went through the future land use map process, and you approved this future land use map as an appendix to the master plan, and this is really serving as like a springboard or a jumping off point for a new zoning map. And as far as how the comprehensive rezoning process works, there's really two aspects to it. So there's going to be text amendments and map amendments. The text amendments are, that changes the actual rules for the districts. It could add or remove districts or amend existing ones. And then map amendments, and that changes where those rules are actually applied within individual properties in the town. Some of the text amendments that we've identified are, creation of new districts. So that's going to be your mixed-use districts. And these were, identified through the master planning process and public input through the future land use map process. Modification of existing districts. Some of the existing districts work pretty well, but there's, slight issues that need tweaking or updating to bring them in line with best planning practice. And then the removal of, redundant or outdated districts to streamline the code. And then map amendments, This involves rezoning specific properties, correcting things that might be considered errors on the zoning maps, such as split zoning, and then extending the extent of the historic district overlay to all the areas which the Historic Commission currently has purview over. And that brings us to the second section here, which is sort of a review of the draft materials we put together so far. What we have prepared here is a draft district framework, and this is sort of meant to serve as an outline for what we expect the proposed final districts to be. And I would like to stress this is very much draft. We're bringing this to you early in the process because we want to try and nail this down so we know what we're working with moving forward as we develop the code.
So where would the original plat residential be, that district?
Let me pull this up here real quick and we can walk through it. Wasn't wanting to. It's thinking about it. I think I have it on my thumb drive here. There we go. All right. Can everybody see that? Should I zoom in a little bit? There we go. Okay, so like I was saying, this is meant to serve as sort of an outline for what we expect the final proposed districts to be. Again, this is a draft. This could change as we work through things or as we get feedback from you and the public. First up, we have conservation residential. This is actually a currently existing district in the code. It's called low density residential, but it's not currently mapped anywhere. We would recommend that this be applied somewhere on the map. We think this would be good for preserving certain areas where a rural character or preserving nature would be desirable while still allowing property owners use of their land. This is essentially be like a large or estate lot type zoning district. Next up would be traditional residential. This is also an existing district. This is what's currently mapped over most of the town right now. And modifications to this would include modifying permitted uses, so allowing duplexes and clarifying that mobile homes are permitted in this district outside of the historic overlay. And it would also change certain dimension and setback standards. And we'll get into this a little bit after I run through this framework.
One thing I want to just mention too is that as we work on these zoning districts, we're going to be working on this over the next 3 meetings. So these are sort of policy decision points that we're working through. And so if the purpose of this is to solicit public input on these concepts. So I don't think we're at the point now where we're recommending anything. This is what we're working through. And we expect that once we get through the next 3 meetings, we'll have recommendations. So these are proposed now, but it's really for discussion and consideration only with the intent to modify recommendations based on community input and y'all's input.
Yeah, that's what I saw that original plat residential, just wondered where that would be. You had an idea.
Right. And that's kind of like when we looked at y'all's districts, your residential districts, you really don't have like a smaller lot or a historic lot district that kind of reflects, how small towns were originally developed. And so we like to put this out there as like, do you want that? And it might be that you don't, and it might be that you do. And so it's a question. And that's really, I would say, for those people who may be listening to this or y'all think might be worried about it or in support, the idea is to bring it up, to get input and make sure that we, ultimately reach a consensus about which direction to go.
Well put, Alex. But yeah, so that was a pretty good description of what we're thinking with the original plot residential. And again, some of these names might change too. We're still working through things. As far as townhouse residential, this is existing, and there's really no proposed changes to this currently. The next would be multifamily residential. This is also existing, and there aren't any current proposed changes. And that brings us to the mixed-use district. So currently, we're proposing two different mixed-use districts. The first would be town center mixed use, and this is really meant for the center of town. This would have smaller setbacks, lower parking requirements, trying to really target that sort of small town, like 19th, 20th century small town feel. And this sort of complements the gateway mixed use, which is meant more for corridors. And the reason we have these separated out is because gateway mixed use would need to have more restrictive requirements. You're going to have more parking. You're going to want a larger setback on corridors. And then there is the commercial district. Really, proposed changes to this would, so the amendments that are going before the council would be part of this. I mean, those would get mixed in with the mixed use as well. But, making them consistent with the historic district guidelines and consolidate them with the highway commercial district. Then there's light industrial. This is existing. The current permitted land uses in light industrial are really kind of outdated, and it lacks any sort of modern development standards. So we propose updating the list of permitted uses to clarify less intense land uses, and then adding additional development standards like buffers, screening, and setback requirements. No, don't do that. No. Thanks, Stuart. Parks in the school district, there's no proposed changes to these. And then there's the two overlays here, historic district, and proposed changes here are really streamlining district regulations in coordination with the Historic Commission. And then the sort of big one is the map amendment, which would put the extent of the overlay over all the currently administered areas of the town. And then the final one here is Midtown Cultural. So this district this overlay is kind of interesting. It currently tries to it provides a bunch of different land use controls. It's trying to restrict things like height, permitted use, parking, and it's really in conflict with like a bunch of other things that are going on in the center of town. So you've got the residential commercial overlay, and then whatever the base district is, and it really makes things difficult to understand for property owners, and it makes it hard for town staff to administer. We did a community comparison and spoke with the representative from the state, and we don't think there's really any reason that there needs to be land use regulations tied to this, but we would retain it anyway just to keep the benefit of the historic district tax credits that are provided by it, and the spirit of what's contained within the land use controls would be rolled into the town center mixed use base district. I'm sure we could certainly discuss that, Stuart. And that brings us to, there are several districts that we would propose for removal. The condominium district, this is currently confused with the townhouse district on the map. And building off that, zoning doesn't typically control patterns of ownership. So we would propose removing this entirely and just deferring to the townhouse district. As far as mobile homes, this district isn't currently mapped, and it's really meant for mobile home parks. And we propose removing this and clarifying provisions for permitted use of mobile homes in other districts. C1 commercial, this is a duplicate, like a carbon copy of the regular commercial district, but with provisions for cell towers. I'm not sure why it's done that way, but we would recommend removing this and then perhaps permitting cell towers as a conditional or a special permitted use in the regular commercial district. That way you don't have two of these in your zoning code. Highway commercial, a large portion of this land is currently mapped in the middle of town where it's not particularly appropriate. And there's so we'd recommend removing this and adopting the new commercial standards in relation to this. As far as light industrial too, this is sort of similar to the commercial. It's just a duplicate of the regular industrial district with cell tower standards, and we'd recommend removing it and, applying current, permitting cell towers in the regular industrial district with, applicable development standards. And then finally, the residential commercial overlay. Again, this is sort of similar to the Midtown Cultural District. It's really adding like additional land use regulations on top of the base district, and it often gets confused with other overlays, and it just makes administration of the code challenging. And we think provisions that are provided in here could be included in the base town center district. But that's what I have for the framework. But does anybody have any questions on this before I move on? I do want to have a more detailed discussion specifically regarding residential standards, which is, we have a slide for that after this. But if anybody has any questions regarding the framework, I'd be happy to answer them. Cool.
Right, so tonight, I think the goal of tonight is to share this information. We want y'all to simmer on it, let it marinate. It's a lot. Matt's going through it. Even I'm like, this is a lot. It's been a long meeting. We definitely want to hear if you have thoughts now, but we don't expect you to be able to fully absorb all of this and provide informed comments tonight. That's why we're going to have these, like at least in I think the next slide after this, we're going to talk about next steps. But we want to present it in Globo and then revisit it. If you have comments tonight, we want to hear that. But just know it's not your last opportunity, and this material is going to be available. Yeah.
But that brings us to a more narrow discussion on residential districts. So some of the proposed changes that are under consideration would be adding like missing middle housing options to mixed-use zoning districts. So, more medium density housing options like smaller apartment complexes, fourplexes, threeplexes, that sort of thing, including duplexes in the current regular residential district, and then permitting mobile homes and manufactured homes on lots outside the historic district. And then the other sort of major consideration here is minimum lot area and lot dimensions. So really streamlining lot and area dimension requirements. So there's consistent standards within individual districts, and then reducing area width and depth requirements within the current residential district, or possibly creating a new district, which is that original plat residential you were asking about, that would allow construction on these older plots. So if you look at these tables right here, this yellow box right here, this is your current district standards. So the low density, this is what we had tagged as conservation residential. Minimum width is 125 feet, and minimum area is 2 acres. And then if you look at the residential, this is what's mapped on most of the town. You can see there's like 4 different dimension standards here. And part of streamlining these requirements would be trying to cut this down so there's a single standard that applies to this district. And then we have townhouse here as sort of a comparison. Minimum width is 20 feet and 3,000 square feet minimum lot area. But as far as proposed, I left low density and townhouse off the proposed here, but these would be included as well. But taking the residential and consolidating these requirements into a 90-foot lot width with 10,800 square foot minimum area, and then the original plat residential would be a 60-foot minimum with a 6,000 square foot minimum lot area.
So I want to make sure y'all kind of appreciate what Matt's doing, because I know y'all had a long meeting. I'm going to point it out. When he went over those districts, and there were probably words that stuck out to you, like duplexes and single family or mobile homes. What this slide does is it takes out what we think are the things that are going to stick out to you, that we want to call out to you to say these are policy decisions that are different from your current code, and we want to throw them out there as these are options. These are things that we want you to consider. We can keep them as a proposed recommendation, or we can remove them. And so we want to be really explicit about these are changes, and they have different impacts to your built environment. But I would think about it mostly affecting new development, right? So areas that are currently zoned and built out are not going to be affected by these standards because they're already built, they exist. They're not going to, unless they get torn down and they have to rebuild, and if they're torn down and rebuilt, their lot is already platted. So they're not having to deal with these, new standards, but it's for new development. If you want to promote mixed use development on smaller lots that kind of have that town feel in those character areas that are in your master plan, right? That's kind of what we're thinking, is like you have a little bit more tools in your tool belt to execute that vision. And sometimes a large lot residential district, if that's just your standard, it doesn't give you a lot of ability to create that really pedestrian-oriented district that's very characteristic of, they are a little more dense. Like, I'm just going to come out and say it. They're a little more dense. And so it's something that we want you all to talk about with your neighbors, talk about in your community, raise some awareness, see what people think. If they're like, we don't want any density anywhere, we like these districts, we just need to hear that, and then we'll go on to the next step, Or if they're like, we do want that as an option. That's the nice thing with zoning, is you can add the option and you can apply it to specific locations. It's not like suddenly you're unleashing, density dragon. It's just where you decide to map it. And so your question earlier, Chad, was the right question. Where would that go? So first, it's like, do you want the tool? If you want the tool, where maybe would it be appropriate? And we're planning on having a community meeting. I know, Matt, I'm jumping all over your slides.
No, you're good.
Where we want to talk more about that, but we'd like to kind of get
Yes.
feedback on these thoughts,
Sort of the general
on these
timeline here.
policy decisions before the community meeting, so that we can hash out location-based decision-making then.
Yeah, man, sorry I jumped in with,
No, entirely all right.
keyed in on that pretty
It
quick.
was the right question, though. I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah, you're asking good questions.
as
most
long as the
definitely.
meeting has been, Chad is on it.
But no, did anybody else have any other questions or comments regarding this? I know it's getting a little late, but
I mean, I think it's gonna be good to break it down where.
cool.
Alex and I have been talking about ways that we can get feedback from people, and Stuart, there's going to be so many. We're going to have comment cards, Facebook surveys. It's going to be out there for feedback.
Yeah, but as we explained, this is going to be an iterative process. At your next meeting, we hope to have a draft zoning map to introduce along with this, as well as a review of like actual text of the residential districts, and then policy discussion on commercial and mixed use developments. And then shortly after that, we'd have like open house community meeting, and really gather public feedback and comment on the zoning map and proposed regulations. And then at the next two meetings, again, reviewing the zoning map, making some final policy decisions, and then in May, final text map amendments, and potential recommendation for approval to town council. But
Yeah, we know these things are big. It's a big task, right, to update the map and the code. And so we want to start with the policy decision-making framework first, so that you're not having to read through 20 pages and figure out what's different, but to see the pages and understand what's going into them in advance. So thank you all so much.
thank you, everyone.
Any other questions on this? Anyone? Open the meeting, public comment section. Anybody?
As mentioned, there's too much here to comment, but there's so much here that I'm going to have to comment at lots of times, or otherwise I'll bore people to death. But I'm going to start by saying that I think that the plat is a terrible idea. At the museum, we have an old map on the wall, and it's easier to see there just what these old plats are like. And it's not just in the center of town. They had imagined having this all over what is currently Abita, and there's all these tiny plots all over the place. And if we make plat one of the possible zoning areas, that's just opening the door for people to ask for that and possibly receive it. And it will turn our town into something entirely different than it currently is. It's not just having a few more buildings in the center of town. Throughout wherever you open this idea up, and just having it in the code law will open it up. There could then be these crammed together homes, and it will greatly increase the population of Abita and make it less like Abita. I also have an objection to the combining of the, if I understood it right, the commercial district with the highway commercial district, because I think that serves a valuable purpose, especially it might need to be adjusted, but one of the things it does is the highway commercial allows gas stations. And gas is I complain about it all the time, but it's terribly polluting, and you don't want it in town, and we're stuck with too many gas stations as it is. But if all our commercial allowed gas stations, even small ones, there's no telling how many we'd wind up with, because even if gas stations are not profitable in and of themselves, they're used to attract people that like that sort of thing, and for convenience stores and the like. So we might wind up with, say, the tobacconist shop that's a favorite in town, adding a couple of pumps. And once you have gas stations, they never get cleaned up. You're lucky if the tanks get removed when the place closes down, just because it's polluting the soil all around in the area. I guess I'll leave it at that for the cultural district and the historic district, they should be overlays, but they don't have to have the restrictions on them. They serve a purpose. The historic to try and get people to have old-looking houses, which ought to be a lot more strict in new construction, and the cultural district to encourage cultural uses. And we don't seem to have a shortage of them, but it needs to still be there to encourage places like the Brew Pub to exist. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Thank you. Yeah, I want to thank the planners that have been working on these things diligently since they started, and I think they're doing a fantastic job personally. One of the things I could comment on is what we were talking about, smaller lot size on historical districts. A lot of reasons for it is land scarcity and high demand, and then the other reason would be walkability and proximity to things that you might need. Economic efficiency, infrastructure facilities cost less. Cultural and architectural trends are in that direction right now. That's all.
Okay. All right. No more public comments. So do we have any announcements we'd like to make?
Pushmo's been rescheduled. The information's on Thank You Facebook. The Whole Town Garage Sale's coming up. Busker Fest. The new magazine's out. That's it.
All right.
Happy Mardi Gras.
Oh, happy Mardi Gras. Be safe.
Yeah.
Yes, it will.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Okay, I think that wraps it up. And a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
A second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
All right.